Welcome to the Social Worker Rants podcast, providing a platform for social workers to share their stories. The podcast covers a wide range of topics, including mental health, social justice, policy, and the day-to-day realities of the profession. This season, season 9, will be focusing on the mental and emotional aspects of money for people of color. Hope you enjoy. Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 9 of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bash Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. I appreciate the love and support. Gracias a todos por todo su apoyo. My guest at this, well, before I get started with the guests, this episode is brought to you by Bash Moreno Consulting. For all of you who are dealing with the responsibilities of caring for your children and your older adult parent at the same time, I'm doing financial coaching, counseling. Go to bashmorenoconsulting.com for more information on that. So I've been busy with doing that and get that running. So my guest who can you believe it's been like I want to say almost 4 years ago since you've been on the podcast.
No, it has not been that long. There's no way.
It's been at least like 3 years.
How does time work? I feel like it was last year. Oh my God.
Time flying.
Hey.
We about to have three different presidents in 4 years.
Yo. That might have to be another episode, but you're right.
So they way back in season 1 or maybe season 2.
Oh man, like, I don't. Wow. Nah, it can't be because this is season 9. You said?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to look back. But anyway, thank you for inviting me back.
Shout out to Paula McMillan Perez. She's also a best-selling author of Latinx and Social Work Volume 1. So if you haven't gotten that book, you need to go get it. I'm in Volume 2.
Word.
And Volume 3 is coming out in December. So I'm looking forward to that.
That is correct. Plus, there is a journal that is a companion for, I think it's volumes 1 and 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
or at least volume 1. But yeah, and also shout out to you, Baz, because you were the one who actually connected me with Erica so that I could even participate in volume 1. So thanks.
No, you're welcome.
But yeah, I'm glad that, we were able to do this again. And since clearly it has been a while since we've chatted, I'm sure there's a whole host of things for us to talk about.
No, yeah, absolutely. You got your coaching business and we get into talking about that and the finances of funding your business, some ways to do that or ways not to do that. And
yeah.
All the ins and outs that everything costs money
regarding
your business.
So everything does cost money, which most of us who are adulting know. And for me, I'm always one of those people, and it could very well be my ADHD that is just like I have an idea in my head, and then it sits there, and it's like, well, what are you gonna do about this? Like, let's make this happen. Let's figure it out. Like, it'll come together. So I was not one of those individuals who had startup funding. I didn't have like any, like when people say like stuff like angel investors and like venture capital, like I don't know, like I know those are terms, but like I don't know what any of that stuff is. I said, you know what, I was a school social worker, am a school social worker, and part of the reason that I even had an interest in coaching is because when I first kind of learned about it, all of the spaces that I was seeing and hearing like coaches exist in were predominantly white spaces. And I knew that there were more, but like I didn't have access, I guess, to those veins to see that it was either in the middle of expansion, because it has expanded much, much more since. And I'm like, nah, we need coaching in like communities of color. We need coaching in the hood. Like we need coaching for people who work in the hood. So like, that was kind of how personalized your coaching started. And to be perfectly honest with you, all I did was I Googled like, oh, how do you start a single member LLC? And I found one of the numerous sites on the internet that kind of like literally gives you like step by step what you need to do in terms of registering with the state and getting an EIN and having, getting a business bank account. And I literally just followed those steps. So like the initial fees that I paid were for starting the LLC. Thankfully there is no fee to get an EIN. They may change that because the government. No fees to start a business bank account. And it was just a lot of ad hoc from there, kind of like Googling. I got a QuickBooks self-employed account because I know that part of the reason I'm a social worker, so I only had to take one math in undergrad. So I wanted something that made bookkeeping as simple as possible. I learned about like the tax portion of it. Again, Google and YouTube University. Like I was never really an avid YouTube user. Like if like there was like a video or somebody sent me something, I would like click on it and watch YouTube, but I never really look to YouTube for like knowledge and resources the way some other folks do. And it was my husband that actually was like, "Oh, you don't know how to do something? Just like a YouTube. Somebody will walk you through it. They'll do." And I'm like, "Okay." So that was actually how I learned about the fact that I didn't necessarily need to file taxes, so to speak, for personalized year coaching. I could have just, filed Schedule C with my personal income taxes because as an LLC, it's a pass-through entity. I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but I believe it passes through like your standard income because one of the reasons that I felt like this could be a good fit for me is that, oh, like I can do some things virtually. So this was pre-pandemic. I started the business in 2018.
Okay.
So I'm like, oh, I can do like a couple of things virtually. And then, hey, home office, because I am putting materials together. I am thinking about like how I can grow. So like there's a deduction there. And then internet for the business, there's a deduction there. And like thinking about like what are some of the realistic things that maybe I may be using in my home that need to be utilized for business or can be utilized for business and at the same time maybe things that I may be working on in other professional avenues. And then I started out with trying to figure out, okay, so like now outside of the people I know in my professional setting, like how do I market? And then seeing that like marketing and like advertising, those are also things that cost money.
Yes.
So it's just like, okay, so I knew that in order to have some, I'd say flexible spending for like some business things, I would have to allocate, a certain amount that like I felt comfortable with from, my 9 to 5 pay to kind of be able to push in that direction until I started generating some business revenue that could kind of tackle that stuff. So at the time, it was like $250 a check, which for me was like a big deal because I was trying to tackle like a few other things. Um, but I was just like, you know what? Little by little, things will grow. And I didn't know much about marketing. I didn't know much about advertising. So I'm like, okay, what is something that I could engage in that falls within the realm of this work that doesn't feel like it's completely draining me? Because at the time, I was a middle school social worker. And if anybody knows middle school, that's seventh grade, that's like the armpit of middle school. They will drain you dry. So if I'm doing anything outside of that in the evening or on the weekends, while I have a passion for my work, I don't want it to feel draining like it's my business. Like I love it. Like I want it to feel like it was a thing, but I also, wanted to get paid for my expertise. So I actually ended up doing a teacher support group in another middle school, like further down in the South Bronx. So now I'm like, bet. Now I'm generating some income. I don't got to worry about these business bills getting paid. So like I was kind of feeling myself. And then it was
Right.
the school year. But then because it's a school, the school year ends, and I was like, oh, yeah, like not thinking about that next step and knowing, okay, so is this a client that's going to pick up again in the fall? Like, how do I bridge that gap for like continuing services? Because I
Right.
didn't necessarily have to pitch myself for that role. Someone recommended me. So now I have to think about maybe this is something that I may want to expand. Like, do I want to do this in other schools? Are there other offerings that I can offer to schools? Because one of the things And you know this because at one point I believe you were working in a school
Yeah, I
that,
was
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, I was at one point in time, yes.
So you know that a lot of times, like we're on our own, we're left to our own devices. The people that at times supervise us, they are usually not mental health professionals. Sometimes they're other educators, sometimes special educators. So they don't always have a clear nuance in our work. So I'm like, you know what? Like I'm not really seeing a lot of people doing this. So like maybe that would be the way to kind of hone what I'm doing so there's a little bit more overlap. So that was also how my business morphed from just like, hey, providing coaching and communities to getting more specific and niching down, which is something that I learned through getting my own coaching, which was also something I had to pay for
Mm,
because part of what happens is that as social workers, as helping professionals, we have so many different ideas and things that we want to put out there, but we didn't learn the business pieces. We didn't learn about marketing, about advertising, about revenue generation, about KPIs and all. We didn't learn this stuff in school.
right,
So for a lot of us, it's kind of learning as we go. Hopefully, we have a mentor. That's not something that I ever had. I now have a mentee because I'm like, you're not going to be on the struggle bus the way I was on the struggle bus. Then figuring out, okay, so I need to actually get an accountant, not just a person that does my taxes. And then meeting with the accountant saying, hey, like, what do I need? Because again, I was using YouTube University and I was using Google to kind of identify what were some needs. And I didn't necessarily know what information was correct and what was just information that was kind of like dribbled out because they wanted to give somebody a taste. And it's like, oh, like book a consultation or, book a sales call. And it's not that I didn't want to work with someone, but I wanted to get some clarity on what I needed to figure out, okay, how am I going to identify the ways in which I'm going to pay these people. Because I'm like, okay, I need an accountant. That could be something that I just have long term for like my own personal use. But do I want an accountant that works with just people and does tax preparation, or do I want someone who works with businesses as well? Which would make sense because not to say that they couldn't do it, but that might not be the best fit. That's
right.
like, you're someone asks you for a referral for a therapist, you can send them anybody, but it's like, what do you want to achieve from therapy?
Mm,
So you can send them to someone specific. So if they had ADHD or anxiety, I could treat them because those are my specialties.
right,
But I don't necessarily treat sexual dysfunction, but a good one of my friends does, and I could recommend that person. So learning about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, as well as identifying like what you need, can really be helpful. And it can also save you money. Because if you just run out and get an accountant, and then you're asking your accountant certain questions, or you don't feel like you're getting the support you need, or maybe they don't have structures. So like for example, my accountant, he offers a bookkeeping service where if I don't even want to look at QuickBooks, I don't got to look at QuickBooks. He will like tag everything and he'll follow up with me if something doesn't make sense, or I could do that portion myself. We can meet quarterly. We can meet monthly. We do a profit planning session at the beginning of the year. And now that I also have opened up a therapy practice, that's even more beneficial for me because now I have employees, which was, I'll get to because, bruh, I was not ready for all of that came with that. So I didn't know that these are all the types of like services, and that's just a little bit that accountants can possibly offer because that's not my wheelhouse.
mm,
Similar to how maybe people who are accountants have no idea how therapists or coaches, structure their services because that's not their wheelhouse. And if you don't
right,
have someone in your personal life or maybe your professional life who has had that experience, that's not information you're going to know. So it can also feel overwhelming too, because then you want to do a consult. You want to get a good feel for their work style, like how they communicate. People who are like supremely high energy, I love them, but I also have high energy. So we're just like this all the time, which I can deal with, but that may be too much for some people.
mm,
So I have learned to say about myself, hey, these are some good things to know about working with me. I love to have things written down. So like shooting like an email, something where I can have a receipt. And it's not like, okay, yes, I do come from like, the CYA cover your ass situation, but it's more as a point of reference
Hmm.
because I want to be able to refer back to steps or suggestions that were provided to me because I am doing a lot. Most of us are. And then I went from having one side business, which my coach says we should not call it a side business. It is our business, regardless to whether it is part-time or full-time. I was working full-time. Then I went from that to I was in a car accident, so I wasn't working at all, not through schools. I had to put, coaching on the side. So that was a thing. I waited over a year on personalized your therapy, which is my therapy practice, because anyone who's in New York knows when you send anything to Albany, be prepared to wait. So it literally took a little over a year before they got back to me. And then that was in 2023. And then I was trying to figure out the differences in between what it is having a self-employed LLC and now a professional PLLC, where it's like, okay, with an LLC, I can do an owner's draw. I don't necessarily have to put myself like on payroll. I could literally write a check and put owner's draw and pay myself, or I can use Zelle and put owner's draw and just Zelle my self, to my personal account. But with a PLLC, I'm like, I don't want to, put myself in a situation. So it's like,
Right.
can I do these things? Plus, being that it's a therapy practice, thinking about HIPAA. So it's like, yes, I'm an employee, but like, what are the nuances of like how this works? And even thinking about, perfect example, a client initially, and insurance is a mess. So you verify insurance, and the insurance tells you that the client is supposed to pay a $50 copay. So you're like, okay, bet. You put that in your EHR, you charge them the $50 copay, then you either find out or the client finds out that the insurance was wrong and it's actually a $20 copay. So maybe the client wants a refund of their overpayment. And they're like, oh, you can Zelle me. Can we though? No, we cannot because Zelle is not HIPAA compliant.
Mm.
So if we do want to send them the money back, we do have to identify what are the ways that we can do that. Or do we want to offer the client the ability to deduct future session copays from the balance that's there? So I knew that I had to ask questions to figure that out. But our regular lay folks may not know things like that because if you don't work in industries where you are beholden to HIPAA, that's not something you're going to think about. So for example, when I wanted to learn a little bit more about billing insurance, one of the individuals that was recommended to me, she's like, oh, you can just cash at me. And I'm like, I actually can't because this is a therapy practice. And then like, I don't do cash app and like Venmo and Zelle. I was like, I can send you a check. And like, let's be real, who's really using checks these days? So the fact that I had to say that to her, like, you should have saw her whole face. She was like, what am I supposed to do with that? So so I said, listen, like I understand, like,
Yeah.
but so I had to, and I again went to YouTube University. Like I even called my accountant. I said, hey, how can I compensate this woman for their services? So they were able to support me with that. So that's another reason that it can be really good to have at least access to a team or people, a team of professionals.
Mm.
Same thing with an attorney. Many of us who came up, like I was in a single parent household, Caribbean parents, it's just like, okay, like why would you need a lawyer? Like, whereas I have friends that were like, what do you mean? You don't have a family lawyer? Like, what happens if you get arrested or if like something pops off in the street? And then I didn't have an answer because that wasn't something that I thought of when I was like in my 20s.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed my 20s a little bit and I probably should have gotten caught up a couple times. God willing, I did not. But thinking about like how do you even identify what type of attorney you need? Like for example, I wanted to trademark it's now in process progress with Paula. And I'm like, okay, I can fill out this application. Went to Google, I saw what I needed to do. I was completely overwhelmed and I was like, hmm, yeah, I don't know. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should look into an attorney that does
Mm.
this.
Mm.
And this could also be a good thing for me because then that could be like a business attorney that like maybe I go to ask some questions or have access to. And there's a site, the name escapes me, but I will find it for you because it could be helpful for you. where depending on what you're looking to do, you kind of like type it in, and then it populates a list of attorneys that can either assist or specialize in those areas. And one of the ones I ended up choosing was in Colorado, and this was like 3 years ago. And like there are times I'll shoot him an email, and good dude, some questions he'll answer for free, and other ones it's like, oh, I'll send you an invoice. So there are different ways to kind of go about it, and not
Mm,
everybody is going to want to charge for like a consult. There are some individuals, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, they will charge you a free. But I've been fortunate that the individuals that I have reached out to for the most part for consults have offered like a free 10 minutes, free 15 minutes. And I feel strongly, especially as a provider, that whether it's therapy or coaching, will offer that consultation because you want to gauge fit. You may have a sense of what you're looking for, or you may have no idea and or feel apprehensive about communicating that you have no idea when you're in the constellation, and then have a fear of wasting money, spending too much money. Is there value in this? And then for me, this is something I like to also speak to, is that I had, a single parent. She pretty much did everything she could for me, but there were times she couldn't. And as a result of that, there is some scarcity mindset stuff that comes
mm,
up for me, that I thought that I kind of had worked through like personally, but then I didn't think about the fact that looking at your business from that lens too is also something that we need to do some work on, because just because you address something personally doesn't mean that you address it for your business, because it's a different mindset. Like the
mm.
CEO mindset, like that's a thing. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I just talk about blah blah blah. No, it really is a thing, because when you've been an employee for so long, it totally is a different mindset, and looking at things differently, looking at how you allocate your time, even like what I'm saying in terms of like identifying who are the players on your team who are going to support you with growth or scaling or both. That's an investment. So it's not like you can look at it like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm spending all this money on an accountant and a lawyer and a social media manager and a web developer. It's not you that's spending the money, it's the business. And
Mm,
that was one of the first things that was brought to my attention by the coach, that I was like, I know I need, because I'm feeling so scattered. So there's just a lot of like different moving pieces to it. So I would say that like by the time I got, I'm gonna say comfortable. I don't necessarily know if that's the right word because I can't remember back that far. But by the time I got like comfortable with how things were going coaching wise, I got like a couple of individual clients. I was doing some workshops. I did a few speaking engagements. All of those were from word of mouth. So I didn't actually have to do a ton of outreach. The things that are on my Instagram for coaching, not curated. And even if I get big and I'm making a $1 billion, I don't want any of that curation, because that's just not who I am. But on the same token, thinking, okay, well, I did this, we got to a comfortable place. Now we're going to do a therapy business. It was different. And I
mm,
needed different support than I had when I was coaching. And I recognized that because the funds, that $250, like I mentioned, that I was putting aside for coaching until I was able to drum up clients, that wasn't going to work for therapy. It wasn't enough. Which is
What?
also part of the reason. Oh, sorry.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead, you had a
sorry.
question.
Yeah, I mean to cut you up, but what was that transition like? So, is it two different? Just to get some clarity for the
Yeah,
viewers and listeners, is it two different businesses that you're doing, or you like transition from one to another? Like what? Like,
that is a good question. So thank you, because I'll just keep going. So in the state of New York, you cannot have a professional company, any type of professional service. So if you're licensed in anything by the state of New York, you cannot just function through an LLC. It has to either be a professional limited liability company or a professional corporation.
mm,
Other states in the United States will allow individuals to have an LLC. So, for example, I have another social work colleague who has her own private practice in New Jersey, but it's an LLC because they do not have that requirement. I believe Texas is also one of those, because I know someone else, but I believe there are other states. So when I decided that I wanted to also have, offer therapeutic services, I was like, oh, I could do it in the coaching. But I said, you know what? Let me look this up before I get jammed up. I don't need nobody trying to take my license, and then I can't make
Right.
no dollars. So that's how I learned that. So then I decided, okay, so I'm just going to get super clear on what services I'm providing through which umbrella. So for example, like I may have somebody reach out to me that wants a specific type of support on the therapy lens, but if that's not something we offer in therapy, I say, well, this is something that I offer as a coach. So it's good because it's very clear delineation. So for the sake of argument, I provide supervision to LMSWs, to school counselors, in charter schools. That's a service that I provide under coaching. Some people do it in their therapy practice, but that's not something that I do. While it's not therapeutic, it's a service underneath all of my school services. So
Mm.
that made sense for me. Whereas with therapy, I have two clinicians and one intern, and I do have a small caseload, but that's individual, group, counseling, sorry, therapy, um, a little bit of couples. And we are also going to be doing, moving forward in the future, we're going to be doing some immigration evaluations. And I'm
Oh,
also
nice.
certified as a, thank you. I'm also certified as a divorce mediator, but I'm not going to take on
Hmm.
divorce mediation services until I go full time in that. Because one of the things we also know is that people get divorced at high rates. In
Hmm.
communities of color, they are spending a great deal of money on divorce attorneys, and that is not the only way to get divorced. So let's put, especially if you have children, let's keep some more of them dollars in your pocket for yourself and your children, especially if you need to um get a new apartment, get a new house, get childcare, get additional support,
Hmm.
and stop paying these attorneys all this money, especially when it's dragging 4 months
Right.
and 4 years. So that's something that I want to do in the future. But I just say all that to say it's very clear delineation in service provision. Also, because if there isn't clear documentation, clear communication, there are individuals who are licensed as social workers, professional counselors, mental health counselors who can get jammed up with their license because they're practicing outside of the scope of their license. And because coaching isn't as regulated as social work, it can get a little mixy. And then there have been people that you might have heard, oh, like everybody wants to be a coach. Like, what type of experience do you have? They only got like a certification for $29. There are coaches that don't know their ass from their elbow, and there are coaches that will blow you out of the water with the work that they have done and the experience they have, which is why it's important, similar to what I'm suggesting about consulting with people, to vet who you will work with. Like, what do
Hmm.
you need to know about their experience and about their credentials? And also, do they know the difference, especially if they're in a helping profession like we are? Do they know the difference? Are they clear rather on both? And the fact that if you see a client, whether it's group, a membership, one-on-one for coaching, you cannot see them for therapy and vice versa.
Right.
That's a dual relationship, and that is unethical. There are people who do it. I'm not one of those people. And I think it's important for us to have those conversations too, so that it can not just spark information and conversation, but it can provide clarity. Because if God forbid something happens and our licenses get taken away, that's our livelihood. Like, yeah, I could do other things, but I went to grad school. I took two licensing exams. I did
Right.
3,000 supervision hours. So at all costs, I'm going to make sure that I protect my license, I protect my business, I protect my livelihood. But part of the way we do that is by educating ourselves, because this entrepreneurship life, this is not for the weak.
As
On your org chart,
yes.
you the president, you the CEO, you the director of
Mm.
operations, you are the social media manager, you are the accountant. Starting out, you are
Mm.
everything. And it's hard.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. Especially allocating, time and like working a full time job. You might have kids, and we're both married. It's like we got spend spend time with our
Hmm.
booze and like
And it's it's so baffling
keep
sometimes
keeping the
because
spark alive. Costs
yeah.
money and like
And thankfully we are married to supportive people, but even sometimes they be like, come on, babe, like We ain't had a date night in a minute. You still working? You coming to bed? Like, I know you've heard
Oh
those things
yes. Oh
too.
yeah, coming to bed too. Especially I got the PS5 recently, so I was like,
Oh,
"You coming to bed
yeah.
soon?"
She ain't been seeing you. Yeah. It definitely is. It's a shift in the way you think. It's a shift in the
Mhm.
way you work. It's a shift in the way you allocate your time. Before we started recording, like I was sharing with you that I would get to school, like I would get to my job early, and then I'd spend maybe like half hour to 45 minutes, like tackling a business task because my workday hadn't started yet. So it's like, what can I bust down in these 30
Mhm.
minutes that will take something off my plate for the evening? So maybe I could watch a show with my husband. Maybe we could go to bed early. Maybe we could go, like, we'll go on a long walk with the dog. Because if certain things didn't get done, then you were kind of left in the lurch. And then it would maybe the struggle because again, depending on where you are in your entrepreneurship journey, it may just be you. You may not have the bandwidth or the resources to maybe hire a contractor or a VA to remove something off your plate. So it is a lot of trial and error. And even for those folks who may have additional financial resources when they start, especially like if you have a coach, sometimes like the coach is like, okay, bet this is what you want to do. You do this, this, and this. And even still with that, it's like I used all the money I had for your services. I can't do all these things. So then you have to think about,
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
how do I prioritize based on the support that I'm being given by the coach, which thing to do? Because that happened to me. I was like, wait, I gotta, oh, okay, I don't have to, but these are things that will make my life, my business easier. My first coach, who I absolutely love, she always says business should be boring. Some of you are so used to creating. And as soon as she said that, my heart was like bumping out of my chest because I was like, oh, she coming for me. So she's like, some of you are so used to creating that you didn't learn how to move forward in the process and close what needs to be closed, to close a sale, to have your onboarding packet, to having whatever your content is that you are providing or your follow-up services. Like you have ideas in your mind, but
Mhm.
it's you feel that you need to have so many things to start. And that was something that really spoke to me again because I recognized I had that reaction in my body,
Mhm.
that it was coming up. And I ended up talking to my therapist about it. And y'all already know, like I think everybody could benefit from therapy. So like y'all could go ahead. But I was telling my therapist about it, and she's just like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, that's what I came to you for. No, I'm kidding. But she's like, so it sounds like you had some strong reactions there. And I was just like, yeah, because I do like to create and I do like to, have an idea of something that I can make better and streamline it. But I recognize that it also causes a level of, for me, and this I've found to be true for some entrepreneurs and some individuals that are doing some things on the side, you also kind of struggle with the fact that the other things are new, like having to do a sales or discovery call or a pitch meeting. Those things can generate a level of anxiety because they don't feel as comfortable or as um I'm losing my words here. I swear I know how to talk. It doesn't feel as comfortable or as
Like natural.
not yeah, it doesn't feel as natural to you as some of the things that you have been doing. But that also steps back into what I was talking about before with that CEO mindset, that entrepreneurial mindset. Because yeah, if those aren't things that you did in your traditional 9 to 5, or for those of us in schools, 8 to 3 or whatever, those weren't things that you did. But now that you're basically, a one-person show in your business, it is your responsibility to do those things if you want to generate business. I'm very fortunate that I have a beautiful and wide network who will say, hey, oh, Paula's good at this. Let me connect you with her. And I would say about 45% of my business in both therapy and coaching has been word of mouth. And that
Mhm.
has been consistent for both businesses. And I'm very grateful for that because, word of mouth,
Oh, of
reviews,
course.
those things definitely catch on. But I had to learn about marketing. I'm married to a digital marketer, but don't think for 1 minute he is doing it for me. He's like, you need to know how this works. What if you hire somebody and they're like boasting all of these numbers and they give you all these things you don't fully understand, but they know how to talk you into it. You're like, okay, bet they can do it, but they ain't doing shit. So you need to know
Mhm.
how it works. And while he's right in the when he first told me that, I wasn't trying to hear. I was like, yo, so what you saying is you're not gonna do it. Like that's all I heard. But I appreciate that because he is a good teacher in the sense that he knows that like I learned from experience, I learned by doing, like getting my hands in it.
Mhm.
So he's like, well, when you're trying to do, and it's so helpful that he knows the social work terms now. So he's like, so when you're doing an intake and you're asking questions about the client's history, like what are some ways that you make them feel comfortable to like get them to come? He was like, you're doing the same thing. So putting it in the terms I understand also to
Mhm.
reduce my anxiety about the things that I don't necessarily feel comfortable with because entrepreneurship is new. And I'm still going to say that it's new. My
Mhm.
first business, 2018, second one, technically 2023, but we really started taking clients this January 2024. Like, this is still new. Like, payroll taxes. This was the first year I had to pay pay. I was like, why? Like, why? But you're getting taxes on my income. Why do I have to pay payroll? Like, why is that a thing? But I have to pay it.
Mhm.
Also, this was interesting for me. So in New York, and this is probably other states too, when you are an employer, you have to have workers' compensation insurance, disability insurance, and then paid family leave. So this is not something I researched. It was not in my mind because in my mind, it's just like, yes, this is a business, but clinicians don't work like part-time clinicians. They don't work a set amount of hours. It's by your session.
Right.
So when I get a letter in the mail talking about, oh, you have to pay this amount of money because you didn't have a policy, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like everyone's remote. Like they're not getting hurt at the job. They're in their house. Like it didn't click for me. So
Mhm.
here I go again, having to do some research and reaching out to folks who do this work. And it's like, I hear what you're saying. However, there isn't different caveats for different roles and different positions. It's like, are you an employer of W-2 employees? Yes, then you must have this. So I
Mhm.
had to go out and find in the same way that you get business insurance. Y'all get business insurance. Social workers listening, some of y'all don't got liability insurance and you have a W-2 employee, get the liability insurance. Get the liability insurance. I work in a school. Get the liability insurance. Anyway, so the same way I had to get, insurance for my business, I also had to buy a policy that covers workers' comp, disability, and paid family leave, despite the fact, and mind you, this is what really pissed me off. At the time, I didn't have employees. I got the employees later, but because I was that registered business, they need to make sure that you have
Mhm.
it.
That happened,
And,
right?
insurance being what it is, yes, it is a scam, but it offers protection. And if I make anything clear in this conversation, is that while we're learning, we do have to protect ourselves because there are a lot of things and situations that can come up that we're just ill prepared for just because we don't have a point of reference because we haven't been in the situation. And how are we going to know that something exists if it's completely new and we're just learning as we go?
No, yeah, absolutely. It's just a lot that goes into even like the littlest things is like the little things like really like bug me out and like I'm not that tech savvy and it's like okay, I learned one thing, then it was like there's like two other apps that figure out how to between the content and just even something as Zoom, like we're recording on it, like Zoom is constantly updating and changing. I'm like, I don't got time to be like learning all this stuff. Like, just why hit record, make sure
Yeah, and
it's
be
on
on
my
my
computer.
way.
Exactly. It's just that's it. Like, as much as I want like to learn it, be like a little bit be extra fancy. So like for the visual to look better and more eye appealing and stuff like that. But still, like it's just a lot.
It is. And when it's just you,
Hmm.
sometimes you're just like, you're feeling discouraged and you may ask yourself, why did I think this was a good idea? Why am I continuing to do this? And one of the things that I tell my employees in the therapy practice is part of the reason I'm so transparent about what the back end of the business looks like is because I want you to know if this is something that something you want to do, what you're getting into. I could have just said a solo provider. I could have been saving money, but I said, you know what? We need more Black and brown clinicians. I have some skills and experience that can teach them. Let me take on two and see how that goes. So I have two and I have an intern, and that's it because I feel like that's where my capacity is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is also something to be said in terms of the entrepreneurial journey, like what you have the capacity for. And when you don't know what everything is going to be in that journey, it can be hard. So you're like, you know what? I just want to get on Zoom and record. I don't have the capacity to learn about all the updates on Zoom. Maybe I'll learn about one or two as I'm scrolling on socials, and that's great because it could help me. But for right now, it's doing what I need it to do. Like the
Right.
thing is getting done. And for me, who has that perfectionist mindset, it's, and I also do struggle. Thank God I'm in a bit of recovery with rejection sensitive because my ADHD, I have to remind myself it needs to get done. You can improve upon it once it gets
Mm-hmm.
done. But if I keep making and creating, like I was mentioning before, it's not going to get done because you're always going to find something else because you want it to be the best. You want it to be visually appealing. You want to provide the resource. You want to have the follow up support. You want to have all these things. But if you don't provide the service, then nobody's getting nothing.
Right. How is it? Well, twofold. Um, New York is, especially New York City, is definitely different compared to other states where regarding insurances that you got Fidelis, you got Health First, you got long term care insurances like agencies I used to work for that provide long term care and between that and getting reimbursements for that on top of dealing with paying employees. How's that for you?
So I'm going to be honest and say that I'm not a fan of insurance. So as the founder, the role that I currently occupy in the practice, I am the director of clinical services. So anything that has to do with like the services, like the forward-facing services, I handle that and the admin stuff. I'm very fortunate to have a super dope director of clinical support who is moving in the direction right now of handling supervision and anything that has to do directly with the clinicians and providing support and training and things of that nature. So I could focus on the admin pieces because one of them um, is verification of benefits, which is going to be moving to my intake coordinator. I wanted to get her situated, but calling up insurance just to verify the benefits is a pain because some of them it is an automated system. So yes, that's handy, but sometimes an automated system doesn't give you all the information you need.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also, depending on the provider that you're working with, you can log into the provider portal and then utilizing the demographics of the potential client or the client, you can also verify benefits that way. But again, that screen doesn't always show you everything you need to know. So my rule of thumb, be it old school, but it has helped me in a few situations, is to actually call and ask additional specific questions to the representative on the phone. Part of the struggle sometimes is that one, hold times are crazy. I feel like every insurance that I have dealt with, let me not say every, but I'd say the bulk have outsourced their phone support to other countries. So, like, I know there's a good portion that go to the Philippines. I've had a few that are from India. And one of the things that upsets me the most is you outsource these services to save money. And then you force these individuals to practice this American accent that is not theirs. Let them speak how they speak using their accents, their dialects, because most likely I can understand them better than them having to try to figure out what they were trained to do this American accent and give me the information. So that's one thing. The second thing is that at times you may get disconnected. Some of the representatives, they'll ask you for a callback number in the event that they get disconnected, others don't. So if you're on hold for 15 minutes, got to a person for 3 and you got disconnected and they didn't ask for a callback number, then you have to start the whole process again. And then you had mentioned some specific plans. So, like, for example, if it's like Health First or Fidelis, these are also Medicaid managed care providers who they also have like marketplace plans. So
Mm,
individuals that do not necessarily qualify for Medicaid because they have earned some income, but they may be on the lower scale. So there are like differences. And then it's just like, okay, so then they want to know like which plan are you calling for? Sometimes if you don't have a client that like actually uploads the card that says the plan, you don't know. So
mm,
then they're like, oh, but we can only give you but so much information. But if I have the client's full name, their date of birth, their address, how would I get all of this information if we didn't at least do a consultation so that you could give me the information that I need to do? So it's things like that. Plus, you also mentioned insurance reimbursements. Fortunately, we haven't had any issues with payments or any denial of claims, but that is something that does happen. Um, and then you have to be on the phone basically trying to recoup money or figuring out why something was denied because you haven't even gotten to a point where, hopefully, and I'm not wishing an audit on anyone, administrative or otherwise, but these individuals haven't seen any documentation about this client. So why are you not paying me for a service that I have confirmed and I can prove that I provided? And these are some of the things that lead not even just group practice owners, but solo practice
mm,
owners to completely depanel from insurance altogether. And I didn't initially, I'd say if we went back 5 years, I didn't initially understand why there were just so many therapists that were out of network or only private pay. And I'm like, I know that it isn't just a handful of us that wants to serve our communities, but it's this. It's
mm,
insurance. And honestly,
mm.
they don't want to pay. They don't want to pay, but it's like,
Right.
how do you want this to work then?
Exactly.
And I know that might be, a pretty straightforward question, but are we gonna get a real answer? So like the debacle that happened in February with Change Healthcare getting hacked and it
Oh
basically
yes.
crippled not just mental health providers, it crippled pharmacies
Mm,
and also doctors offices because they weren't able to process claims, they weren't able to pay. Fortunately, that was not the exchange that I was using, so it didn't impact me. But I know other providers that some didn't make payroll. Some group practice owners had to utilize their personal money to make sure their staff got paid. I know smaller practices that have closed. I know a doctor's office that had to close, and he literally has employees that are suing him because he was literally living reimbursement to reimbursement to be able to make payroll and keep the lights on. So he couldn't do anything else. And while that is not ideal, because you want to think that, the business or the provider that you're seeing is flush with money to keep the lights on, sometimes that's just not the reality and they're doing the best they can. So when situations like this happen, when then a whole system gets crippled by a hacker, you as the person that is trying to use your coverage doesn't necessarily understand or may not even know what's going on.
mm,
So it just makes some of these situations so much more challenging to navigate that providers don't necessarily even want to deal with insurance anymore. They just want to do straight private pay or out of network and allow the client to pay the upfront cost and then they get reimbursed hopefully by the insurance. And then there are some professionals that are just like, you know what, this is too much headache. I don't even want to do this. I'll just coach full time or I'll coach new therapists or I'll just, take the niche that I was doing in therapy and I'll just coach on that, do a membership, do a retreat, do other things because they feel like they're in better control of their money. Um, and being on this side of it, I do understand that, but I also recognize that there's always going to be a part of me that needs to do direct practice. Like I thrive on it, but I also realize that this entrepreneurial journey is not easy. And there are times you have to take breaks. Like I'm not going to stop it, or I'm not going to quit, but I may have to slow down and realize again what needs to be done. Like
mm.
done, what can wait.
Yeah. No, no, I totally no relate to that, and I do see a lot of stuff and self pay stuff because yeah, insurances don't want to pay. I totally forgot about the hacking situation because a couple of clients at the job I was working at were affected, not able to get their medication at the pharmacy because
Yeah.
of that situation. It was a whole mess.
Yeah. And some people still haven't recouped from that because even though they kind of addressed it, there were some things that didn't get
Really?
addressed. And then, yeah,
Did it get
there's
addressed?
yeah, there are some people still waiting on payments from them that were pending.
Oh,
And
I believe
then
that.
so
I feel like the
change.
government didn't like do
No,
nothing.
no, I got so there was one point in time. I'm trying to think of when it was. I had United Healthcare. I don't remember when. I think it was earlier this year. So the thing with Change Healthcare happened in February. So the reason I bring up United Healthcare is because United Healthcare owns Change Healthcare.
Mm,
So United Healthcare, Optum, all of them, they're kind of like underneath the same umbrella. So I literally, it was this month, was basically sent, those letters, oh, there was a data breach and
mm.
we're not sure what specific personal information, was accessed. It's August, bro. Why are you just sending this out in August to members? What is that? I don't know. So that's one thing. The second thing is, so I'm low key, like low key, like a little conspiracy theorist. So I said one day, I said, what if this was an inside job? What if there was like a reason they did, like, oh, somebody gonna put me on a list somewhere, but I'm gonna say it anyway. What if this was all to kind of be able to capitalize on those businesses that maybe didn't have the resources to be able to continue to function after this? And then what if they just bought those up? Because I've been seeing Optum urgent cares pop up in the Bronx that I've never seen before. I'm like, wait,
Mm,
y'all provide insurance. Why y'all opening up medical facilities? And then the place that I used to go for my primary care was called Riverdale Family Practice. The two owners, they sold the practice. So I was like, okay, great. They're getting older, they're gonna, retire. Now it's Optum Medical PC. And I'm like, so this is a thing y'all doing now? So it's just like, what if they're capitalizing on the cheaper businesses to buy because they can't sustain? Now, I don't want to believe this is the reality because, I'm the eternal optimist and I feel like there are good in all people, but like something just isn't right here.
mm,
And this was a giant mess that is still not 100% fleshed out. There are still people waiting for recoupment behind this and to be made whole. There were surgeries that were scheduled that couldn't be done because they couldn't file claims. This impacted people's health. Granted, it wasn't um, urgent like medical procedures, but procedures nonetheless that could benefit individuals' quality of life. So something
yeah.
that impacts so close to home, I just really struggle with the fact that it was really this big of there was no contingency. Like we don't pay all this money for like cybersecurity. Like you're a
Exactly.
multi-billion dollar insurance company. Like y'all don't got people for this. So I don't know. I don't know what to think, but like I was following the story rather closely, but there was just so much kind of floating in and out. And then I had to remind myself, I am a small business owner. I am an entrepreneur. I am not functioning on the level that they are. So even though I do want to stay abreast of what is going on, especially so I can best support my clients, because these interruptions, they did impact other entities. Fortunately, mine wasn't, but I wanted to stay abreast so I could figure out, okay, if I can't pay my providers, that's going to have to come out of my pocket because that's not their
Mm,
fault.
mm,
I would have probably been eating ramen noodles had that happened, but not everybody is in a situation where they can take their own personal money to be able to cover payroll or be able
mm.
to cover overhead. So
Right.
it was a very challenging time for many.
No, yeah, absolutely. So we in the last, I can't believe it's already like the last quarter of business
Almost,
wise. Yeah, almost
almost.
of of the year. Where do you seeing what the fourth quarter looks like in terms of your business?
So my fourth quarter for coaching is actually going to be slow because I am not seeing any individual clients for the rest of the year in means to support my own recovery because I had mentioned to you I had surgery. I was going to start a membership for school social workers. I I wanted that to happen in September. It's not realistic. Like, this is one of those things that I was like, yeah, I want to do this, but I do not have the bandwidth right now, and I do not want to start something that I do not have the fidelity to keep up with. Because once I start this is going to be something that is consistent. So for coaching, I would say it's kind of a little bit on hiatus. I was fortunate that I have a wonderful contractor. She facilitated a summer workshop series for a nonprofit that was working with SYEP youth. And I'm very proud of the work that she did. And I'm proud of the work that I did because I planned out all those sessions, the PowerPoints, the activities, and it was the first time that the business had done something on that scale. So it's something that now I can think forward to next year in terms of being able to pitch and promote things in that line. But as far as the group practice, just being present for the clinicians whose caseloads are growing and working on organic marketing efforts because in my section of the Bronx, I haven't seen a lot of people even talking about therapy or even having like affordable resources. We have Spanish speaking clinicians. There are some places that don't have that. So it's like, how do we create a little bit of visibility? And it's just like we are a virtual practice. So even though we have people here in the Bronx, I have somebody that's in Orange County that's going to do their own like organic work. So thinking about like how am I also supporting my staff to learn how to do the things that I'm doing, as well as enhancing their clinical skills and supporting them to identify their passion projects, because the goal is to not only provide therapy. There's so much social workers can do and have the bandwidth to do. And if they want to break out on their own, they'll have the skills to be able to do that. So I think that it's going to create space for me to be able to do that and also take care of my personal needs so I can recover strong and I'll be back out in the streets in 2025.
No, that's a great plan, and so I wish you all the best, and
Thank you.
not only on your physical recovery, but also with the business and providing great insight into just everything, all like the back end stuff that unfortunately has not been taught in grad schools, and we go into private practices, and it's like
Yeah,
all this back end stuff is like, woo.
yeah, you'd be like, wait, what? Back end, back office, what?
Yeah.
Like I have to do that? Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Where can
Well,
people
thank
find
you.
you?
Okay, so for coaching, personalize your coaching on Instagram. I'm not gonna lie, the website needs some work, but I'm still gonna
Mine
offer it
too.
up.
Mine too.
Person personalize your coaching dot life for the coaching end. For therapy, on Instagram, we are personalize your therapy underscore and personalizeyourtherapy.com. We are currently accepting clients virtually in the state of New York for therapy. We have evening and weekend availability. And like I mentioned before, we have Spanish speaking clinicians, and all of the information that you may need for a free consultation is on the website.
That's great. And it's so needed, especially with everything going on
Life be
in New
life
York.
in.
Well, always great to talk to you.
You too. Let's not make it another 3 years.